These are the running backs that I can't stop drafting in every competitive league that I'm in right now, but no matter what the build, these are the names that I keep circling back to. So if you're not on them yet, you're I hate how confident I am in this one. Every time I'm on the clock early, I don't even scroll. I already know. It's Bijan. He's the best overall pick at running back, and the fact that it feels this easy low-key scares me. I've already taken Bijan first overall on a few best ball teams, and every time I close the app, I wonder if I guess Galaxy brained it. Because the numbers beg you to do it. 365 touches, nearly 1,900 total yards, 15 touchdowns. Running back 1 in 10 of his last 12 games, over 120 total yards per game down the stretch. It wasn't fluky, it wasn't game scripted, it was just winning football. Consistent, unflashy, every single week, and yet he still goes after Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson in most drafts. Sometimes even after Saquon. And that's where doubt starts to creep in a little bit. We've seen this story before. The guy with all the signs, we talk ourselves out of it because the wideouts feel safer. Now I'm stuck asking myself, am I early or am I just forcing it? And I don't know which one scares me more, if I'm being honest. There's this version of Bijan that I keep circling back to. Not the highlights, not the fantasy points, just the stretch, that 9-game stretch down the back half of the season. When everything quietly started to tilt his way, handled 73% of the backfield work, averaged 122 yards a game, scored 10 times. They just stopped rotating and let him be. And I keep asking myself the same question, did we witness the breakout or did we miss it? Because we moved him up aggressively in drafts. The 103 is no joke. And that's the part that I can't shake. I've passed on guys like Jonathan Taylor before, thought it felt too easy. Told myself efficiency was the problem, maybe it was the offense. There's a million different ways to talk yourself out of this one. So if you look back at some of the stats, sure, he was 3rd in rushing yards, 5th in receiving, top 3 in red zone touches, but here's where it gets me. Number 1 in yards created and number 3 in fantasy points per game. And he still left a ton of touchdowns on the table. He didn't score a rushing TD until week 6 and finished with 15. So what are we doubting? Is that even priced in? The fact that we'll have Michael Penix for the entire season, a competent offense? The Falcons were already a top rushing team last year in terms of success rate, and they hadn't even unlocked Bijan yet for most of that beginning of the season. So maybe I'm early, maybe I'm wrong, but if this is what he looks like before the offense catches up to him, what happens when it finally does? The thing that finally cracked it for me was hearing why they drafted Penix. The Falcons weren't desperate, they already had Kirk. They already paid him, but they still spent a top 10 pick on a quarterback, and when Penix was asked what excited him the most, he didn't say the weapons, he didn't talk about the scheme, he talked about Bijan. And that's what it hit me. The leap already happened. The only thing that didn't change was the price, because there's a reason he's going in the top 3. For some reason, I had this weird residue from the Arthur Smith rookie year, and it's harder to let it go than I originally thought, because if I really believe what I saw on tape last year or what the numbers are telling me, this isn't just a projection anymore, it's a correction. And the only question left is, how long are we going to keep pricing in this mistake of not taking him in the top 3, maybe not taking him first overall? At the very least, he's the best overall running back pick this year. So yeah, Bijan is still my best overall running back pick this year. And no, I'm not taking him over Jefferson and Chase every single time, but I'm also not acting like I have it all figured out. When I do go running back early, it's not even close. He's the one that I trust the most to anchor a build, handle the volume, and still give me the ceiling that I haven't fully seen yet. And maybe that's the line that I keep circling back to. I don't need him to be the 101 every time. I just don't want to look up in December and realize I talked myself out of the guy who was always right there. I'm trying to be as high as I possibly can on Christian McCaffrey. He's my league winner, hiding in plain sight at pick 9. And somehow pressing drafts still feels like a risk. It's not that I don't believe in CMC. Part of me just can't shake what he did to us last year. His 2024 was an epic disaster. He played just 4 games because of bilateral Achilles tendonitis and the PCL sprain. 348 total yards, 0 touchdowns. But 2 years ago, he dominated, over 2,000 yards from scrimmage, 21 touchdowns. And now he's going off the board at pick 9 overall, running back 4 on most boards. That gap between his peak and the injury, that's the tension that I just can't shake. Is this the rebound year, or am I chasing the shadow of CMC? So I'm kind of stuck between betting on the upside or fearing for another lost season. But if I'm honest with myself, Christian McCaffrey is still a league winner that I want on as many teams as possible. I'm not asking you to ignore what happened last year, but his ADP dropped from that coveted 101 to the 109. That gap feels like the market screaming and something that I kind of want to take advantage of. But you know what's really tripping me up? It's that CMC is fully engaged in training camp right now. So it's this weird tug of war. On one side, the man who can still dominate fantasy if he's healthy, and on the other side, the injury history that's haunted him more than almost anyone else in the league, definitely haunted fantasy players more than anyone else in the league after last year. So it's just that psychological toll that we all have now. Last year just completely burning a hole in our confidence. It's like watching that fighter who just keeps getting up. Are you gonna bet on the resilience that you've seen time and time again, or are you too scared to pull the trigger? I keep coming back to this because if McCaffrey stays healthy, that's a big if, this is the guy who just wins leagues by himself. Just every missed game chips away at that ultimate ceiling. So the question I'm wrestling with is, do you pay the price for the upside? The upside that we've seen many times. League-winning upside, because it's the biggest gamble with the biggest payoff, and that tension is what makes fantasy football so damn fun. But at least this one, the moment where it really shifted for me, where I was finally sold, that I've been brought all the way back in, was listening to some of the quotes from Shanahan and Kyle Juszczyk. Shanahan saying that McCaffrey is as healthy as he can be, or Juszczyk just glowing about how explosive he is. That doesn't just feel like optimism to me, that feels like things they've actually seen, like proof, I guess. That the guy who totaled over 2,000 yards and 21 touchdowns isn't some distant memory. He's here, and his draft stock falling isn't about talent, it's about fear. And that's not how you win. Scared money don't make money, right? Because people are scared that he's not gonna come back and be the same guy. That's what it comes down to. But what if the real story is that he's way ahead of schedule and ready to roll? Because if we're being honest, that's not really hope, that's kind of what we've been hearing all offseason. And if that's true, you're not just drafting a running back, you're drafting the player who can still carry a championship team. He's the league winner that's hiding in plain sight. And if you're not leaning in now, you might be letting the biggest opportunity slip away. Because the risk is real, but the opportunity is the whole reason we play. Look, I'm not pretending like this is a sure thing. Christian McCaffrey still scares me, but here's the thing. He's still my league winner. And at pick 9, he's hiding in plain sight. And I'm not drafting him to save my season. I'm drafting him because if he stays healthy, he's the one that can win it all for me. Again, every year I tell myself I'm done with these type of backs. Too old, too many touches, too many signs of decline. And yet, every year there's a guy like Alvin Kamara who slides into round 5, and I feel that pull, like I'm about to get tricked again. But what if that trick is thinking that Alvin Kamara already fell off? He just turned 30, he hasn't hit double-digit rushing touchdowns since 2020, and the Saints might be one of the worst offenses in the entire league. But last year, they gave him 296 touches, a career high. But what I can't stop thinking about is they flirted with Ashton Jeanty, they kicked the tires on moving on from Kamara completely. But then they extended him and they're still calling him premier to beat writers. And now there's really no competition behind him. He only cleared 70 yards in one game without Derek Carr last year, and he still finished RB5 in points per game. How is that even possible? Because there were games where he caught 5 passes and still didn't even clear 30 yards. But you still had to start him even though the offense was completely unwatchable. Kamara was the one guy that you had to use, but you actually could never watch the games. But that's what's messing with me. You're not drafting him for upside. That's probably what scares me the most. I'm sitting here convincing myself that Kamara still makes sense. I keep telling myself that I'm drafting Kamara for the floor, for those 5 catches, the dump offs when the Saints fall behind, and that should be enough. But then I see it again, 317 opportunities last year, the most of his career. That's not a phase-out plan. That's definitely not load management. That's a team saying that we have no one else. So maybe that's the point, because even when they tried to get younger, they didn't. And even when they met with Jeanty, they blinked. And when it came time to justify it, they still had nice things to say about Kamara, at least to the beat writers. But it didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like desperation is what I'm getting at. And then there's the scoring. On nearly 300 touches, he had just 8 touchdowns. No burst, no ceiling, just volume in a terrible offense. And the quarterbacks, Derek Carr was check down king, but now that's gone. Now we get some combination of Spencer Rattler and maybe a rookie, which isn't necessarily better, but it is different. And I keep wondering, are the rookies gonna feed Kamara like Carr used to? Or are they just gonna run for their lives and forget that Kamara even exists? That's kind of where I freeze, because the volume, that's not gonna go away, but the games where he barely moved the chains and you looked up and he had 11 points, that wasn't because of skill, it was just because the entire offense collapsed into him by default. They tried to build something new, but it didn't happen. So you're not even drafting the role, you're drafting the collapse and hoping that Kamara is still the guy holding the pieces when it breaks. But the thing that finally got me was realizing that Kamara already fell. We watched it happen. The efficiency dropped, the touchdowns fell off a cliff, and the big plays, completely gone. He looked like a version we've been afraid of seeing for years. And yet, he led all running backs in receptions, finished top 6 in total yards per game, caught almost 5 balls a game. That wasn't a comeback, that wasn't a breakout, that was after the decline, and it still worked. But here's what really hit me. The price never moved. Not after the fall, not after the survival, not after 1,400 yards on a broken team. We saw the cliff, and we're still fading him like it hasn't happened yet. Round 5, like he's some sort of ticking time bomb, but he's already exploded, and he's still scoring 10 points a game. That was the floor. It couldn't get any worse. So that's when it completely flipped for me. Kamara didn't prove he still had it. He proved how far he can fall and still matter in fantasy. That's not risky. That's super rare. Because if this is his floor and the volume is still there, what exactly are we waiting to see from a 5th rounder? So yeah, I'm done pretending. Kamara isn't just safe. He isn't just fine for round 5. He's actually one of the best running back values in all of fantasy, period. The floor's been tested. He doesn't look like a league winner, but he's one guy that survives when everything else goes wrong. And I'd rather draft that than chase a highlight reel that never shows up. I don't love it, but the more I fight it, the more I think I'm just scared to be wrong again about this guy. So I think we go the other way. But real quick, if you're serious about actually beating your friends this year, go to fantasyaccelerator.com or hit the first link below. You'll get instant access to my full 2025 draft kit, rankings, sleepers, busts, cheat sheets, the same system over 12,000 players used last year to dominate their drafts and steamroll their league. But here's the deal, I'm keeping it limited so the real ones inside actually get my full attention. You'll see on the next page how many spots are left. The price goes up later this month though, no matter what, so now's the time to lock in. What if I told you the best running back value in fantasy already showed us he's a bell cow and no one's drafting him like it? His name is Chase Brown and he's the best pick you can make in round 3. And it's not even close. Let's talk about the Bengals backfield. Zach Moss went down last year and Cincinnati handled the entire offense to Chase Brown. We're not talking about like a 60-40 split here. We're talking about 90+% of the running back touches over the final 8 games. That's true bell cow territory, and he delivered. Over that stretch, 23.6 touches per game, 116 total yards, and almost a full touchdown. That's running back 1 usage. That's not projection, that's proof, what he's already done. And now he's sitting in the middle of round 3 going after guys that still need an injury to sniff that type of workload. But here's what most people aren't processing. Cincinnati didn't just give Brown work, they leaned on him, not just between the tackles, but on early downs, but also on passing downs too. The Bengals also throw to their backs a ton, 21% of the time. That's one of the highest rates in the entire league. So that means checkdowns, screens, hot reads, all of the good stuff for fantasy. And in the 3rd round, it's the type of floor and ceiling that you need from a volume perspective. Zach Moss coming off an injury, Travion Williams is depth, P. Ryan got brought back, but he's really just a 3rd string floor guy, not a usage threat. Everything points towards Brown having the backfield on lock. They haven't really given us any reason to believe that it's not going to be the case. So suddenly what you're getting here is a feature back on a high tempo, high upside team with PPR access, explosive upside, and no immediate threat. And yet somehow he's going in the 3rd, not the 2nd. Not the turn, the 3rd. This is the part that trips people up. We want to believe that running back breakouts need some sort of big off-season moment, a new offensive coordinator, a new contract, depth chart headline, something. But sometimes the breakout has already happened. Chase Brown already had his moment. He already showed us that he can handle the volume, and the team didn't touch it. No free agent threat, no rookie investment, no real pass game specialist that can touch his role. That is the headline. And fading it because it doesn't feel new, that's how you miss in fantasy football. Because here's the truth, Chase Brown checks every box you want from a round 2 back, but you can get him in round 3. Don't overthink this. Achane averaged over 22 fantasy points per game with Tua behind center, but without him, 8. That's not volatility, that's a player who needs one thing to go right, so every time I see him sitting there at the turn, I wonder how long we're gonna keep pretending it's not worth the risk. He's going as RB11, right in that weird tier where you're not chasing safety, but you're not drafting blind either. And yet, when I'm on the clock, I hesitate. Because unlike a guy like Derrick Henry, Achane is the only one in that range who might actually lead all running backs in catches. I've read every take, the injury concerns, the size questions, the efficiency drop, short yardage woes. But here's what keeps messing with me. The entire horizontal package in Miami was built to funnel touches to him underneath. And now Jonnu Smith's gone, the only other guy that those looks were going to. So that means we have some premium targets up for grabs. And Achane, not Tyreek Hill, might just be the one who absorbs them. That's what I can't shake. He wasn't schemed like a running back, he was schemed like a wide receiver. So how do you price that? It's not the talent, it's not the role, but a nuclear ceiling locked behind one of the most concussion-prone quarterbacks in the league. I keep telling myself Achane can't be that guy. He's tiny, he's missed games, he doesn't have that traditional bell cow role. But then I look back at those 10 starts with Tua and start to feel insane for doubting it, because when Tua was healthy, Achane wasn't just breaking big plays. He was the entire system's counterpunch. Miami led the league in pre-snap motion, and they weren't using it just to scheme Tyreek the ball. They were running it through Achane. He had more motion carries and motion targets than any back on the roster, and then I started digging into some of the red zone stuff, because if he's really just a speed guy, they'd rotate him out of there, right? Except they didn't. And with Jonnu Smith off the field, which is obviously what we're going to see this year, Achane was suddenly the red zone plan. He had 29 red zone touches in just 10 starts, led all backs in percentage of receptions that turned into touchdowns, and was used for those kind of misdirection missiles near the goal line. He wasn't just getting lucky, this was by design. And I keep looping back to something that we've already seen in the past, Achane leading all running backs in fantasy points per touch over some pretty large stretches. Because we always talk about role and volume and snap share and that all of that matters, it does. But what if this is the one guy where he isn't isn't as important? What if Tua McDaniel don't need to give him 250 touches? Because when the system clicks, nobody can match his efficiency. So yeah, there's risk. He's 190 pounds, he's in a committee, he'll probably get banged up again. But when I go back and watch the games where the Dolphins offense actually worked, it wasn't Tyreek deep, it wasn't even Tyreek in motion, it wasn't Jaylen Waddle in the slot. It was Tua getting out quick in Achane's hands. Everything he needs to go nuclear. And I'm starting to think this whole time we've been looking at him for the wrong reasons. Maybe that he's like a different type of workhorse. So for fantasy, I keep waiting for the touches to climb, for Miami to hand him the workload that I feel more comfortable with. But then I saw the real plan. Miami ran the highest rate of pre-snap motion in the league last year, which is not a coincidence. They weren't just trying to get guys open. They were designing plays specifically to put Achane in space before contact. And it was working. Not on volume, not on opportunity, but on efficiency. We're only 2 years removed when he had the highest touchdown per reception rate among all backs in 2023. That is insane. So the whole narrative of needing 250 touches to be fantasy relevant completely fell apart. Because here's the kicker, Achane already finishes a top 3 fantasy scorer on just 175 touches, if we're talking on a per game level. So that's when I stopped thinking of Achane as like a part-time player with upside. Because you're not drafting like an undersized committee back, you're drafting the most efficient and explosive fantasy weapon in the game. The one guy who could finish as the RB1 overall without even touching the ball 300 times. So yeah, Achane still scares me, that's real. He's small, he's in a committee, and Tua's health, that's certainly key. But here's the difference now. Every time I see him sitting there at the turn, I ask myself, how long are we going to pretend that the upside's not worth the risk? Because honestly, I think it is. But if you're not ready for the full draft kit yet, you can still get my top 150 rankings totally free at top150free.com. It's the exact list that I'm using in every draft this year, and odds are at least one of your league mates already has it, but if they do and you don't, you're going to feel it by round 3. So grab yours now, it takes 30 seconds, it might save your whole draft. I almost didn't say this out loud because the second I do, he stops being a sleeper, but Cam Skattebo is my #1 sleeper running back right now, and I don't think people understand how close he is to mattering and fast. I hate how much I like this guy. He's a rookie. They didn't take him in the top rounds, so we have no pedigree. And that's usually enough to cross a guy off my list completely, especially in a situation like this. But here's what's messing with me. Brian Daboll didn't just draft him, he talked him up. The hands, the toughness, the versatility, and somehow already he might be the best pass blocker on this team. Tyron Tracy, he's still learning the position. Devin Singletary, we know what he is. So I keep asking myself, why am I ignoring the only back who fits what Daboll actually wants? I went back and looked at some of the touches, split out wide, slot routes, wheel routes, not just flares and dumps, but like real pass catching work. And the beat writers are already calling him a weapon. Not a body, not a can't filler, but a weapon. Because Daboll, even when this offense fell apart, quietly increased his running back target share last year. And that doesn't happen on accident. That's kind of the way he's wired. And now you drop in a guy who led all D1 backs in yards after the catch. Had the highest target share last year of any rookie. That's not a fluke, that's just his profile. The build's kind of weird. You watch him run, super compact, thick, violent, but it works. And I'm telling you, I've passed on guys like this before. These guys that just refuse to go down. This seems like the exact type of sleeper that you draft, you wait, and then he ends up being a huge part of your team in the fantasy playoffs. But the moment that I finally flipped on this one was that swing pass in camp. Did you guys see that? Skattebo catches it clean, stiff arms the linebacker, bounces off 2 more, and then finishes the run. They weren't just testing him, they were featuring him. That's when it clicked. He isn't the backup plan. He's the guy they're scheming in, the guy that already is trusted to handle pass pro and create yards after contact, and no one's drafting him. And if the Giants are bad again, and they will be, he's the back who benefits. Because he doesn't need game script, he is the game script. It's kind of nice with the guys you'd have to draft in front of him. But look, I know what this sounds like. Day 3 rookie from Arizona State on a bottom 5 team. That's my #1 sleeper. Skattebo doesn't need a breakout. He just needs the season to go how it always has in New York. The offense stalls, injuries hit, coaches scramble, and the one guy who can catch passes, block blitzes, and actually make the first guy miss, that's the guy who ends up mattering when you least expect it. And that's what makes Cam Skattebo the mega sleeper for my running back categories. I didn't even know who Harvey was the first time I saw him. I just caught a run on TV, paused, and opened my phone to check who number 7 was, because whatever that was, it didn't look normal. Now he's going in round 6, sometimes 7, and I get why no one's panicking. We're not even sure if he has the job yet, but I can't stop coming back to this. If any other rookie had this profile, 4.440 speed, 96 percentile dominator, and day 2 capital, we'd be calling him a sleeper. Instead, he's just sitting there behind a backfield that is totally beatable, by the way. And every time I scroll past him on the draft board, I feel like I'm the one that's missing something at this point, because the deeper I go, the harder it is to justify silence. The backfield is wide open, and RJ RJ Harvey might be the most explosive guy in that room. So why is no one talking about him? That's what's messing with me. I've been burned chasing these ambiguous backfields before, but a lot of times it actually does work out. But this one doesn't feel that murky, actually. It just feels underpriced. The stat that won't leave my head is that he had over 300 touches last year. That's not a role player, that's a workhorse, and one of the only ones in college football who actually was the offense. So he earned those touches, and he was top 10 in yards after contact, top 5 in breakaway run rate, and had double the missed tackles for so that the next guy had on his team. So I'm sitting here staring at this rookie running back profile that looks like it should have gone in round 2, but at the very least he's going to be threatening for 15 touches per game eventually. This was one of those offense we were just begging for an elite running back to drop into because they need a lead guy. It's just the loop that I keep getting stuck in is if the role's available, the coach likes him, and the tape backs it up, why hasn't the market reacted? Why is he still stuck behind Estime, who hasn't been practicing, or behind Dobbins, who's on his 3rd team in 2 years, or behind Jaleel, who they didn't even trust with 5 carries a game down the stretch? Remember I said this, I just keep waiting to see something in camp where he immediately goes up 2 to 3 rounds on his draft board. Some quote that sparks interest around him and people start looking at it a little bit deeper like we are. Or maybe I'm just seeing something that's not there. It's possible that we're just ignoring something that's already happening. And that's what's messing with me. The flip for me didn't come from like an actual stat. It kind of came from, it felt like I was just lying to myself after a while. I kept telling myself that he was just a good athlete, good tape, great combine, but probably just a depth piece on this team. The kind of guy that we would like in theory, but never really trust enough to draft in fantasy. And then I went back and watched it again, not just the big runs, but the hard runs, the cutback vision, and really just a lot of second effort yards. And maybe more importantly, like what he was doing in pass protection. And it kind of made me realize that this isn't just a bet on traits, it's a bet on is he NFL ready? And I think that he is, and don't take my word for it, Sean Payton has basically said the same thing. The quote that I haven't heard many people mention is that RJ processes faster than most rookies we've ever had here. I feel like that's one of the best compliments you could ever get as a young player, especially from a coach like Sean Payton. It's just a line that kind of hit differently the more times I read it, because now I kind of see what he meant. It's not just that Harvey can win the job, it's that he might already be understanding the offense better than guys that he's competing with. That's the shift. So I basically just stopped asking myself if he could earn touches and started wondering if he's the one that they're already scheming for. And even if that's only half true, it's not a situation where we can just wait on the breakout. We don't ask ourselves enough, what if we are wrong? And what if we're just completely mislabeling this entire situation and he's the bona fide starter already? This one's not a lock. It's definitely not a flag plant just yet. But if we look up in September and RJ Harvey is getting 15 touches per game, are we really going to be surprised? Or are we just going to be mad that we didn't say it out loud sooner? I've passed on Omarion Hampton more than once already, and every time I've regretted it a little more. At some point, you got to stop calling it caution and start admitting that it's fear. He's going right around pick 48, running back 19 off the board. 4th round, and I keep telling myself that's fair until I look at what's actually happened. The Chargers gets burned a 22nd overall pick. That's not a depth piece, that's not a stash. A 1st round back in an era where teams barely take running backs at all in the first few rounds. But instead of a clean runway, we're getting a ton of coach speak. Harborough said that they have 2 starters. We had Greg Roman call Hampton the total package. Which one is it? Because they're still leaning on phrases like 1-2 punch, which isn't great. And Najee, that's who everyone wants to talk about, got $5 million and hasn't missed a game in 4 years. That's not a flyer, that's probably a fixture. So I'm stuck in this weird mental loop. The talent is obvious. He's a rookie. Of course, there's some uncertainty there, but the capital, that's pretty heavy. Even the quotes are positive in a weird, vague way, and yet every time I think about taking him in the 4th, some part of me whispers, what if they slow play this? It's not that I don't believe in the player, it's that I'm afraid the situation might drag him down before the breakout can even start. He's a rookie, he's in a timeshare, he's got a $5 million vet ahead of him, and yet I still come back to the same thought. If they really wanted Najee to be the guy, would they have drafted a running back in the 1st round? The answer is, I don't think so. I don't think it's a depth piece. It feels more like an eventual centerpiece to me. The more I look, the gap starts to widen a little bit. Hampton handled over 300 touches last year, cleared over 2,000 yards, scored 17 touchdowns. He also caught nearly 40 passes on an offense that collapsed without its former quarterback, and somehow he still was more efficient. Circling back to Greg Roman, he just called him the total package. So even though Harborough keeps saying that they have 2 starters, only one of them is 22 years old with 1st round draft capital, and a skill set that actually fits this new system, because Najee was fine last year, but he did lose his receiving role to Jaylen Warren, and he's only here on a 1-year deal, certainly not to carry the team. I've just been down this road before with rookie running backs. Last year, I waited a little bit too long on Jahmyr Gibbs, told myself that one would be a slow burn, and by the time I trusted it, the ceiling games were already gone, and I didn't have them near as much as I should have. And now I'm sitting here looking at Hampton, and I keep thinking, what if we're already in the slow burn? Because it's not going to be clean in September. Najee's going to get first drives. The coaching quotes will still say like this, vague, but what happens in October? When Hampton gets 15 touches, 18 touches, and then 22 touches. I keep looping back to that version of where the season goes. The one where the rookie isn't just a flash in the pan and he quietly takes over. And the more I try and talk myself out of it, the more everything, the capital, the tape, the usage, the quotes, just keep pulling me back in, and I start to think this might not be the lead up to the breakout, this might be the breakout and the moment that we're all gonna regret not getting on more aggressively. We're just pretending the wrong things right now. I kept thinking this was a stash, one of those picks that you sit on, wait for the vet to slip, and then maybe you cash in by Thanksgiving. But then you realize this is up there with some of the highest running back selections in the draft in quite some time. Only 10 backs have gone higher since 2010. So if we wait until this is completely clear, players like Achane would never hit us in the face. And if we're talking about similarities there, honestly, Hampton, he's bigger, more college production, and has a clearer path to more work than either of those guys did. And for some reason, I'm hesitating again, and that's when it hit me. I wasn't passing on the name because of Najee, I was passing because I didn't want to feel stupid for trusting a rookie so soon. But that fear is not protecting me, it's keeping me from the type of swings that win leagues. So I'm not waiting anymore. This staff is already talking like it's his job to take. Then maybe the only thing left to do is believe that he can actually take it. I kept telling myself I would wait one more week, one more report, one more sign, but I think I was just stalling because taking a rookie this early forces you to commit. You're committing to being too early, you're committing to ultimately just being wrong. And that's actually what's scary, that wait and see game. All it ever really gets you is a front row seat to someone else's breakout. So this time I'm swinging first, and I'll just deal with the miss if it comes. No rookie is walking into a better setup than Ashton Jeanty. Top 6 draft capital, weak competition behind him, and an up-tempo offense built to run the football. And what if I told you his closest comp coming into the NFL is LaDainian Tomlinson? But somehow he's still not being drafted like a guy who could finish RB1 overall in fantasy. He's going off boards as the RB5 right now, end of the first, between names like Henry and Achane. And I keep staring at that price wondering, what exactly am I scared of? The Raiders spent a 6th overall pick on Ashton Jeanty. They cleared the running back room behind him. Say what you want about Mostert, but in my eyes, there's really no credible committee threats. Even Chip Kelly, who never tips his hand, called Jeanty as talented a back as I've seen. The setup should be a green light, so why does it still feel like a maybe? Is it a rookie thing? The fear of drafting a guy before he even plays a snap? Or maybe it's just the pass game stuff that no one wants to talk about. The drops, the pass protection issues that don't show up on the highlight reels. Because this isn't a perfect profile, but it is a rare one. A bell cow frame and a Chip Kelly offense that's playing fast again. And don't forget, he led his class in missed tackles forced, nearly 2,000 yards after contact in college, so every box is checked. Every excuse is gone, and the only thing holding back the breakout might be us still drafting scared. The first thing that tripped me up was the receiving dip that nobody talks about. Ashton Jeanty caught 43 balls for over 500 yards the year before, but last season, he cratered. The drop rate spiked to 9.1%, 5th worst in the class. He finished 27th of 31 in yards per route run. And in pass pro, he allowed pressure on 7.6% of snaps, which is pretty rough, honestly. And I know it sounds nitpicky, but this is the part that breaks most rookie profiles, not talent. It's trust. The second a guy misses a blitz pickup in the NFL, his snap count evaporates. But then I look at what the Raiders actually did. They gave him top 6 draft capital, $22.7 million signing bonus, and they cleared out the backfield. Mostert's 33, and the rest of the room is pretty irrelevant. So the Raiders desperately need this investment to work. They were dead last in rushing EPA, success rate, and first down conversions last year. They didn't need just a spark, they needed a savior in the ground game. And now they have a 22-year-old who averaged 4.8 yards after contact per carry, forced a missed tackle on 1/3 of his rushes, and posted nearly 2,000 yards after contact last season. That's not talented. That's the kind of violent, unsustainable output you only get from backs who break fantasy. But the line is still a problem. They rank 24th in run blocking win rate, and their most used O-line combo is on the field for just 30% of plays. The only guy who started all 17 games is in a contract year. It could gel, but I'm definitely worried. Then there's Pete Carroll, pretending he won't rely on just one guy, which feels like classic coach speak. Let's not forget that Kenneth Walker got the 5th highest rush share in football across 2 seasons under Carroll. And you don't draft a guy at 6 overall unless you plan to do that again. You don't hire Chip Kelly unless you're going to run your offense through an up-tempo ground attack. I almost took the Mostert news as a sign to fade Jeanty. He'll be the primary 3rd back, they were saying in the media. And that whisper in my head nearly won out. And then I remembered he was projected for the 5th most carries in the entire league. That's a full workload. Day 1 in Vegas. That's a guarantee, not a question mark. It's not just the volume, it's how the Raiders reshape this offense around Jeanty's strengths. Rookies don't just get that type of trust unless they're special. So that's the second I stopped pretending that this isn't any sort of backfield battle. It's Jeanty carving out a path for every snap. But I get why you're nervous. I get why drafting a rookie in the first feels like a reckless, almost arrogant move. But honestly, I'm done letting fear steal my fantasy season. Jeanty isn't just another rookie. I'm not drafting him to hedge or play it safe. I'm drafting him because he has the cleanest path of any rookie we've seen in years to finish as the RB1 overall. If I'm wrong, I can live with that, but if I'm right, we're not just winning leagues, we're rewriting the rules on drafting scared. Derrick Henry went off for 2,100 yards and 18 touchdowns last year at 30 years old in a brand new offense. And the craziest part is that was supposed to be the year that he fell off. Instead, Baltimore just gave him $30 million, like they already know he's about to do it again. Henry's going at the turn right after CMC, right ahead of Achane. And somehow he's the only one that feels like a risk. Yeah, he's 31, he's barely used as a receiver, but Baltimore already said that they're pulling back his workload. But do we believe him? That alone's probably enough to scare most people off. But then you add in this, the Ravens have the 4th toughest rushing schedule in the league. They've got younger backs that are pushing for touches. So it's not that the red flags aren't real, but they keep stacking up. But here's what I can't get out of my head with King Henry. The team plans to use him less. Yet they just gave him $30 million, the most ever for a running back over 30. So if they're dialing back the volume, why does it feel like they're going all in? That's the part that I can't shake. They've already showed their hand. In camp, Henry took every single first team snap with Lamar. Justice Hill, 0. Keaton Mitchell, still recovering. They're not experimenting, they're committing, they're doubling down on what worked. And then there's this. Derrick Henry led the NFL in breakaway runs, so you're pairing the NFL's most feared downhill runner with the NFL's most terrifying QB talent. That's not a scheme fit, that's a defensive nightmare. One that forces softer fronts to Henry by default. And Baltimore's leaning into it. They drafted the fastest offensive tackle in the class to anchor their right side. Speed is key here though, because it's not a protection pick. It's the guy that's gonna build lanes for Lamar on the right side. But not just for Lamar, a literal runway so Henry can hit the second level untouched. So even with the red flags, the age, the touches, the usage, he still broke 60 plus tackles last season. That's the same as Jahmyr Gibbs and Kenneth Walker combined. Now he's running behind an offensive line that moves in a scheme that's built to create space for a team projected top 5 in rushing touchdowns. So when people ask why I can't fade Derrick Henry yet, it's because I don't see a washed up back on his last legs. I see a 240-pound missile still in an offense that knows how to launch it. The moment that flipped everything for me was realizing that we're still fading Derrick Henry like he's a 30-year-old power back on a dead Titans team. But that's not who he is anymore in Baltimore. They gave him 60 red zone touches. That's 3.5 per game on a team that finished top 2 in red zone trips and number 1 in play action success rate. He's not just surviving, he's thriving in a role this offense was built to support. They stretch the line horizontally, Lamar's holding linebackers in place, and Henry, he's getting 3 to 4 yards of space before anyone touches him. Not because he's breaking tackles at the line, but because he doesn't have to anymore. That's the part that I couldn't unsee. This isn't about tread on the tires. It's about the length of the runway, because Henry's still top 10 in yards after contact per carry, and now he's in an offense where contact isn't even the first thing that he sees. So no, it's not the same Derrick Henry, but the new one. He could score 20 plus touchdowns and finish RB1 overall on red zone volume alone. Everyone said last year was supposed to be the end. New team, new scheme, no receiving work, 30 years old. All the signs were there, the kind we're taught to trust. But he didn't just hang on, he dropped 18 touchdowns on people's heads. So maybe we've been asking the wrong question. It's not whether Derrick Henry can survive the cliff, it's what happens if he never falls off. Because this year's what matters, and I'm not calling him a sure thing, but if you're asking who you can grab outside of the top 10 and potentially walk away with a running back 1 overall, Henry's the freak we keep pretending is already buried. I still remember ignoring Jamal Williams the year he scored 17 touchdowns, and now I'm staring at Roschon Johnson sitting in the exact chair. But every time I start to buy in, I hear that voice inside my head saying, what if he's just not good enough? He's going in round 15, pick 195, basically the last name you click before you close your laptop. And that's what's twisting me up, because I can see the path, I just don't know if it's real. Ben Johnson's in Chicago now, the same coach whose running backs in Detroit finished first, third, and first in PPR points over the last 3 years. He's reunited with DeAndre Swift. That's the narrative that everyone wants to talk about. What they don't want to talk about is last year, Swift had a career low 3.8 yards per carry and a 44% rushing success rate. Not good. So you would think that there's a door open for Roschon here, right? Because the offensive line isn't the same disaster that it was. They went out and rebuilt it completely. The Bears have borderline a top 5, definitely top 8 offensive line in the league now. But the staff still hasn't tipped its hand. Swift is projected for like 190 carries, probably another 50 targets through the air, maybe more. And it's really hard to get Roschon above like 115 carries. So if that's all he is, just a short yardage hammer, am I really just buying touchdown scraps at the expense of a dead roster spot? And yet the other side of it's pretty clear as well. If Ben Johnson splits this backfield the way he always has, Roschon's ceiling is sitting right there at the very end of the draft. So why do I keep freezing before I click his name? Why does it feel like I'm trying to trust a system when I'm not sure if I trust the player? I keep coming back to one thing. Roschon's rushing share did drop from year 1 to year 2, and that's rare in a backfield this chaotic. Usually someone rises. Instead, he kind of disappeared. And then I remember the last time Ben Johnson had Swift in Detroit. Swift grabbed just 28% of the running back rush attempts, while Jamal Williams ate up 61% of the carries and scored 17 rushing touchdowns. touchdowns. It was never flashy, but he was the guy pounding the rock, cashing in all the touchdowns. And they don't really have another guy besides Roschon to fill that type of role. He's the only true power back on this team. Averaged 4.6 yards per carry against zone runs in his rookie year. But this offensive line is what I keep coming back to, how much more improved it is than people realize. Adding Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson, I think you can make an argument it's the most improved offensive line in football. Roschon did capture a little bit of that short yardage role last year, and he didn't do a ton with it. So I'm not exactly sure if he can be like a lead back type of player, but he can definitely be useful in fantasy, especially because his cost is basically zero. Meanwhile, Swift is coming off a miserable 2024, but the Bears are still expected to run in between the tackles. If that projection holds of like 190 carries, then Roschon might not have a huge ceiling. But one thing I keep coming back to as well is they're definitely going to run the ball a lot more this year, so the pie might be a little bit bigger than it has been the last couple at least. A Ben Johnson offense is going to run the ball 25 times a game, maybe 30. And if that happens and Roschon's share climbs just a little bit, he's got a real shot to be relevant. The thing that bugs me is they still haven't committed to like a clear split between Roschon and Split, so we're kind of guessing on what that's going to look like. But that ambiguity goes both ways. But what finally cracked the code for me was just seeing that the market has not reacted whatsoever. They're leaving him right where he was drafted last year, when everything around him has completely changed. Ben Johnson backfields don't just survive behind good O-lines, they dominate. That Jamal Williams role is wide open. So my money's on Roschon proving he can do more. The floor is already pretty low, so what are we afraid of losing here? That's, I guess, the knot in my stomach that tightens a little bit every time I see him. I guess it's that same pit that I felt in my stomach when I just passed on Jamal Williams when I knew he was going to score a ton of touchdowns. But the rest was kind of unclear. So this isn't about hype or guessing, it's about making a bet on a very improved offensive line and a coaching staff / scheme that's gonna be meaningfully better this year. You're not really drafting Roschon to start on your team, you're holding a lottery ticket that he's gonna be a usable flex for you and score a ton of touchdowns. Those players can be super useful, and if that role kind of grows, that's the difference between a forgotten late round flyer and a league winner that nobody saw coming. What if I told you there's a running back your league's ignoring who could lead the league in touchdowns if things break right? Think 2023 Raheem Mostert if you can draft him late. Minnesota didn't just sign Jordan Mason, they traded for him. Here's what's about to happen. Mason's not just filling the depth chart, he's a deliberate part of this Vikings backfield as they kind of shift to a 1A, 1B situation. But here's what makes it so clean. Mason was top 10 in broken tackle rate, top 10 in yards after contact per attempt in limited touches in San Francisco. But this isn't just a theory, he's already proven efficiency on a team that doesn't hand out touches easily. Now in Minnesota, the door is wide open. Aaron Jones is 30, coming off of heavy volume, and as much as we want to believe in durability, the Vikings just told you with their actions that they're planning for balance. And let's not ignore the macro layer here. Minnesota's offensive line, top 12 run blocking unit last year by most metrics, and that was without the Mason-Jones pairing that they had in mind. Mason's skill set, physical, decisive, falls forward, it fits perfectly with what this scheme wants to do, so double-digit touchdowns is not out of the question. Most people look at Mason and think, but he's just a backup. You're not going to be that person. You're drafting the guy who's going to get work even if Aaron Jones is healthy, and the guy who's going to become a league winner if Jones misses time. This is contingent upside, committee upside, and a high efficiency pick all wrapped up into a 9th rounder. That's not just depth to your fantasy team, he's leverage. So what's the move? You draft Mason as often as humanly possible, you sit him, and you wait. The second Minnesota shifts to more committee looks, or if Jones starts to wear down, Mason's the kind of player you don't just start, you might count on him down the stretch. So this isn't a stash, this is a plan. If you've been ignoring Jaylen Warren in fantasy, you're probably just a casual, and by October, your whole league will wish they drafted him late. He's easily the cleanest flex value in 2025, and no one's seeing it. Let's break this down. He's the guy where you look up mid-season and you realize there's this one guy that's been carrying you that you ended up drafting pretty late. Warren's going at the 8-12. That's maybe RB3 territory at most boards. So what are you really buying? He's a back that ranked 3rd in yards after contact per attempt, 15th in missed tackles forced per attempt from weeks 8 through 18. And this is what people miss. Even when the role wasn't full-time, Warren produced. People look at Pittsburgh and say, but Caleb Johnson's there now. And yeah, Johnson's a factor, no doubt. The guy racked up 1,500 yards, 21 touchdowns at Iowa, and he's built to handle volume. But let's really think about what that means for a second. Pittsburgh isn't making one guy the hero this year. In Arthur Smith's system, it's run heavy, play action, ball control, and that's where Warren thrives. They're not gonna have just one guy being the hero in that backfield. He's the piece that fits perfectly in this committee. He's explosive enough to flip game script and efficient enough that he doesn't need 20 carries to deliver value in fantasy. That's what Warren does. That's what he's consistently done. He forces the issue and is completely game script independent. New OC, better game scripts, Rodgers under center. This offense is just going to move the ball differently, and Warren is the guy who's about to capitalize on that. People want to say Warren's just a flex play, but even if he gets 45% of the touches, he's a flex that you probably don't take out of your lineup. And in a run-first offense where Rodgers is being protected, where game scripts that lean kind of ground heavy, that 45% could go a little bit further than you think. This isn't about hoping for some injury to Caleb Johnson. This is about recognizing that Warren is built for efficiency and has real standalone value in fantasy. So what's the move? You're going to grab Warren if he's there after pick 100. You plug him into your running back 3 or your flex spot, and you let the game flow do the work. Because this isn't a flyer. This is the kind of pick that quietly wins leagues with consistent, usable weeks. There's always one running back who people overthink in fantasy drafts. In 2025, it's Rachaad White. He is the cleanest volume pick, sitting there in the 12th, and nobody's seeing it. Everyone's too busy chasing rookies in this range, but White is the boring pick you'll thank me for in week 2. Let's break it down. White's ADP is in the 12th or 13th round. That's insane when you look under the hood. He cracked 1,000 total yards last year, despite losing touches to Bucky Irving. He scored 9 touchdowns and finished in the top 25 fantasy points per game at the position. But guess what else? The Bucs didn't add any serious competition in the offseason. No free agent splash, no premium draft capital sunk into this backfield. So White's role didn't just shrink. If anything, it consolidated. And at this price, that's a legit cheat code. Here's where most people get tripped up. They want to knock on the efficiency, but the passing game work is what matters here. He was top 20 in running back target share, and those weren't dump offs. Those were designed looks, option routes, screens. But no one wants to factor in this. Baker has shown repeatedly that he will check it down to running backs early and often. There's no reason that this shifts in 2025, not with White's skill set through the air and Bucky pounding the rock on the ground. Let your league mates hold on to the lack of efficiency narratives because we already know they're too lazy to look at the real numbers. White was number 3 in yards created per touch last year, which basically means that he got what was blocked and more consistently. Exactly what coaches value if we're being real, and we already know that he can handle a massive workload if Bucky does go down. So in the 12th or 13th round, you're drafting a potential workhorse disguised as a forgotten man, and that's how you win late. So what's the move? You draft White if he falls in your league. You're getting floor, ceiling, volume, and pass catching insurance for a pick that costs you nothing. Forget the noise. He's one of the best running back values on the board in 2025. You'll probably skip over Zach Charbonnet on draft day and hate yourself when he's the reason you lost in week 6. He's drafted like a handcuff, but he is the cleanest late round stash with real upside. Here's why you should take him now and before it's obvious. Here's the reality. Charbonnet played over 40% of Seattle snaps last year with a healthy Kenneth Walker, but he did handle 35% of the backfield touches. Walker's still the starter, but the Seahawks showed last year that they don't want to ride him solo. They want to split, and Charbonnet is the clear number 2. But here's where it gets interesting. Seattle ranked top 10 in running back target share last year, and you know whose profile that fits perfectly? Charbonnet's. He logged a 10% target share last year, and they trusted him in pass protection. And what if Walker misses time? Charbonnet vaults into an 80% role. You saw it in flashes last year in games where he handled 15 plus touches where Walker was dinged up. And there are people out there that are just chasing rookies right now with way less clarity. Charbonnet's path is pretty clear. If Walker's healthy, he's an easy flex value in PPR. If Walker goes down, he has league-winning upside. And that's the exact kind of running back that you want to take late. That's the kind that can flip your entire season without costing you anything. Now, I can already see the comments. He's just a handcuff. No, this is a flexible role pick with contingent upside, significant contingent upside. Charbonnet isn't just waiting for a miracle. He's part of the plan. So one tweak to Walker's health, he's the entire plan. All right, so what's the move? First, you're gonna grab him in the 10th every time. You're gonna sit him, and you're probably gonna wait. But when the opportunity hits, you're holding one of the running backs who can take over an entire backfield while everyone else is scrambling. And when opportunity hits, you're the one holding the running back who can take over this entire backfield while everyone else is scrambling on the waiver wire. Charbonnet isn't just a stash. He's the exact profile that wins leagues from your bench.